We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it.
Stop and frisk was found to be unconstitutional, and in part because it was ineffective.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton clashing at Monday night's presidential debate over the controversial policing method known as stop and frisk here in New York. It's now a flashpoint in the election as the candidates spar over its impact on crime reduction and the racial divide. Joining us now to dig a little deeper into all of this is legal consultant Kent Zimmerman. Welcome, Kent. So great to have you here.
Good to be back.
Let's talk first about what stop and frisk is exactly and how it's related to the Terry stop, which is practiced in other parts of the country.
So stop and frisk, which is sometimes called a Terry stop, the same, is a process by which the police will stop people and often frisk them, pat them down to see if they have weapons or anything else on them. It can even be done without probable cause. Interestingly, doing it is not unconstitutional. The issue in New York was that it was being done disproportionately, without reason, to non-whites more than whites.
So this argument that they were having over whether it was constitutional or not, in a way, they were both right.
Yeah, they were. They were talking about slightly different things. There's a nuance here. It's okay to stop and frisk, and that applies, by the way, this goes way beyond New York City. It applies to every city, every town in America. You can stop and frisk as the police. You can't do it disproportionately without reason to non-whites. And so Trump was saying, hey, it's okay to do it. And it's true, it's okay. But if it's applied, as it was in New York, according to a federal judge, disproportionately to non-whites, that's the unconstitutional part of it.
Right, because it's based on a 1968 Supreme Court decision, Terry versus Ohio,
Exactly.
right? So that is still constitutional. What a New York City judge deemed was unconstitutional was the way it was being deployed.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the figures, because I think the peak was 2011 here in New York City. What, over 658,000 people were stopped and frisked, disproportionately blacks and Hispanics. Close to 90% of them did not result in any conviction or fine.
That's right.
So it's easy to see why that would anger a lot of people, correct?
Absolutely. You get stopped, you haven't done anything wrong. It's happening more to non-whites than to whites. That's unconstitutional. You're right that 88% it was didn't do anything wrong. What's very interesting is that although that peak was in 2011, the stop and frisk, the stops, happened 97% less by 2015. Yet the overall crime stats, according to the New York City Police database, stayed about the same.
Okay.
So that would be one argument to say, you know what, stop and frisk may not have been what lowered crime. Crime was going down nationally, separate from the stop and frisk
I see, because that is something that both Mayor Giuliani points to. He wrote an opinion piece for the Wall Street Journal this week saying, hey, it worked in New York City.
Yes.
But you're saying the crime rate nationally went down, so we can't...
You know, it's hard to see a cause and effect, or there's not evidence that's been pointed out of a cause and effect. It's true crime went down, but crime went down nationally across cities, whether or not there was use of stop and frisk. So was there a cause and effect? We haven't seen evidence of that yet.
And now we're seeing homicide rates creep up, according to the FBI.
Yeah.
Are we seeing that nationally as well?
We are. So between 2013 and 2015, murder rate went up about 1.2% in New York City, similar nationwide. But if you look at the last 5 years leading up to the present, actually murder was down. If you look at the past 10 years leading up to the present, it was down actually double digits. So if you look at the long picture, actually crime is coming down, not going up.
Now, what about if we look at the political picture and the political landscape? Is backing stop and frisk a winning or losing political proposition in your view?
Yeah, you know, I think for Trump, it may help him with some of his base, but if he wants to win over undecideds, particularly minorities, and he's tried, he's done events and other outreach to the African-American community, I don't think this is going to help him with those communities, particularly those that were disproportionately impacted in a negative way by stop and frisk.
It's such an interesting topic because Mayor Bloomberg has said, you know, here in New York, it lowered the murder rate, so really we were actually protecting black lives because, you know, blacks are most often killed by other blacks here in New York City. But then you'll speak to young men who were stopped and frisked, and they say it's hard to overestimate the effect that this has on a young man or a young woman.
It's humiliating. It's not constitutional when disproportionately applied. Here's the analogy that sometimes makes sense to people in the business community and elsewhere. The IRS, they do random audits. That's legal, not unconstitutional. If they did it disproportionately without reason to minority-owned businesses, Well, that wouldn't be okay. It's the same thing that's happening here. It's just that it's the police rather than the IRS making the random stops.
Right. And of course, many conservative groups are saying the IRS is targeting conservative businesses, and that would be unconstitutional.
That's the argument.
If that was found to be the case. Kent Zimmerman, thank you so much for that.
You bet,
Very
Tanya.
interesting conversation.